Confirm the meeting is live.
Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the People Overview Committee. I'm Councillor Peggy Mullock, Chair of the committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting has been live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting has been held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately ring the support telephone number they have already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else. As Chair, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the Monitoring Officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interest they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone invited to speak during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time they speak. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed, which is not included in the register of interests, and leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. I have no interest to declare. I'm now going to read out names, if they would confirm their presence and any interest. Kevin Turley. Kevin? No. Roy Aldcroft.
Peggy, Roy Aldcroft's trying to... Oh, are you there now, Roy?
Roy?
Peggy, Roy Aldcroft was having difficulties joining the meeting, as was I initially, but I'm obviously here now, but he is trying to join.
Okay.
I'm here.
Sorry.
This is Roy Aldcroft. I'm present and no pecuniary interest to declare.
Thank you, Roy. Ruth Horton.
Yes, here, Chair, and I have an interest. It was a family member accessing the SEND service. Thank you.
Okay. Christian Lee.
Yes, I'm here, no pecuniary interests.
Matt Lee. No. Elliot Lynch. Cecilia Motley.
Present, no interest to declare.
Kevin Pardy.
Yeah, here and no interest to declare. Thank you.
And Carol Morgan. No. Okay. Prior to turning to the items on the agenda, I must advise members and members of the public that following legal advice, item 6, the SEND Inspection Action Plan, will now be taken in private session at the end of the meeting. I shall now turn to items on the agenda. Can the committee officer confirm if there are any apologies or substitutions?
We've received apologies from Sian Lines, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, disclosable pecuniary interest. We have dealt with that. Item 3 are the minutes. I move that the minutes of the People Overview Committee meeting held on the 15th of January 2020, as circulated with the agenda papers, be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair, Councillor Aldcroft.
Thank you. I will now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. Okay. Item 4, public question time. There are no public questions. And item 5, member question time. There are no member questions. So we will now go to item 7, the COVID-19 update. Can the officer introduce themselves and present this item, please?
So I'm Sonia Miller. I'm the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care and Safeguarding. With me is my colleague Danessa Gray. She's currently a Service Manager for the Case Management Teams in Children's Social Care and Safeguarding. Can I have the presentation up, please? So members, we've been asked to report back to yourselves, People Overview Committee, in relation to COVID-19 and the response for children's social care and safeguarding. There is a report and appendix that hopefully you've had access to and have been able to read, which gives quite a lot of detail. I don't propose to go through that report in a huge amount of detail, but to give you some summary highlights and key points, and then hopefully take questions. So hopefully we'll take it that way. Can I have the first slide, please? There's obviously quite a lot of information in the report, but I thought I'd start by kind of giving a bit of an update on the national and regional picture in relation to children's social care and safeguarding across the country and regionally. And the key highlight here is that Shropshire is in line with the pattern that is happening both nationally and regionally. So initially, most local authorities saw a significant initial decline in referrals at the start of the lockdown period. We did see that decline, and that's shown in the data set in the appendix of the report. Mostly across regions, the region, West Midlands and nationally, those levels of referrals have returned to sort of normal and above levels since the schools went back, both in the first phase in June and then obviously since September. What is a significant change is that the seriousness and the complexity of the family situations and the levels of harm that are being experienced, and that is across national and regional footprints. Delays in progressing care plans due to the impact of COVID, especially with partner agencies across the system not being able to participate fully, mean that children are not exiting the system. So as well as increased numbers of children becoming looked after regionally and nationally, we've got fewer of those children who are looked after exiting the system, and that does impact on our demand. Nationally, there was an increase projected in looked after children of 10% for all local authorities, and we've hit our kind of 10% at the moment in Shropshire, but that is not just through children becoming looked after. I'll go into that in a bit more detail later, but also through because the children haven't exited. We have got a shared picture across the West Midlands. We're not an outlier in any way, and this was confirmed at a regional meeting on Monday, hence it's not actually contained in the report. Can I have the next slide, please? Most of the report focuses on children's social care and safeguarding and how we've responded to COVID and how we've had to work the situation out. I think it's really important at this point that I recognise that there's been a huge kind of effort from right across the Directorate and the Council to support children's social care in order to do that as well. So the education colleagues and public health colleagues, particularly those within the Safeguarding Partnership team as well as many others, the Community Resilience team have been a great support to us in terms of supporting vulnerable families as well. I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because this isn't something that as a Directorate service we could have done by ourselves. So in terms of summarising the response to the service, I think what needs to be recognised is the way that our staff team, who were all previously office-based and very much, reliant on a safe office space to do their work, responded immediately and with an incredible can-do attitude. They adapted to working virtually from home, found ways of working with families that were quite innovative and really focused on being able to do their job and put children at the centre and keeping them safe and supporting families. We focused very much on the high-risk children and maintaining face-to-face contact where we needed to and where it was safe to do so. I think it's important to recognise that our assessment team, so the ones that deal with work as it first comes in, have never gone to virtual visits. They've undertaken face-to-face visits throughout. Obviously, all of those visits have been risk assessed in terms of COVID and the risk to themselves and the risk to the families, and that's added incredible amounts of work on top of, and particularly at the speed at which they have to work and the timescales that they have to maintain to respond. We've rated all children and families sort of red, amber and green, along with the safety of the visit, to work out, which are our priority children to maintain face-to-face visits with, and where we've been able to do sort of virtual visits as well. Anything that we've done has been in line with the government guidance and has had management oversight in terms of the decision making and the guidance given to staff. There have been incredible examples of creative and innovative ways of working with and engaging children, particularly around things like family time and supporting foster carers. So trying to enable parents to read to children over family time virtually, to play games with them, to enable them to have quality sort of family time, even though they weren't able to do that face to face. The foster carers and our children's homes their response has been phenomenal. We've got foster carers that have taken additional children. Some have had 4, 5 and 6 children in placement for short periods of time to enable us to safeguard children quickly and effectively. They've supported home education, and a lot of our children have thrived within that home education setting, which was quite a surprise to us for some of them. We've managed to evidence examples of good practice, and some of those are highlighted in the report, and some of the feedback is also in the report. And that's, credit to the staff and the way that they've responded to be able to identify our areas of good practice under the pressure and the challenges that we faced. There's been an exceptionally positive use of virtual meetings for a whole range of meetings, right the way across, from strategy meetings through to child protection conferences. And the engagement of professionals virtually has actually increased, particularly in the multi-agency meetings, so from across our partner agencies. The adoption of fostering panels, I think that's a huge positive about how successful they've been, and we've managed to continue to progress adoption and fostering approvals by that being so positive and such a good positive response to those virtual meetings. Could I have the next slide, please? The challenges, I think the demand paper, the data does explain this, but I'm happy to take questions on it. But we've had an increase in demand. And combine that with less work exiting the system because we haven't been able to progress the work, have led to a significantly increased caseloads across the service. Our social workers are currently at the top of where it's comfortable and verging on safe to do so. They're working extremely hard to continue to support families, to move them forward, to make progress, but there are a number of sticking points in the system. Initially, one of the greatest sticking points and the most challenging was the fact that it took the court system some time to be able to adjust to working virtually, and that had a significant impact on us progressing court care plans for children who are the most complex and the most sort of at risk and most affected by that kind of work taking place. During the first part of lockdown, partner agencies were working virtually, and this did leave social workers as the only practitioner in many situations, not all, supporting some very, very complex families and being the only ones that were actually doing face-to-face work. This placed considerable pressure on them psychologically and emotionally, as well as leaving them, some of them often feeling quite isolated, and the only ones that were in a position to problem solve with families. That has changed significantly as obviously the restrictions were lifted, and we are seeing a return to partners working more directly and face to face. Working virtually can be a real challenge, so especially when working with domestic abuse. So we have to consider very carefully the safety of victims within those situations in relation to child protection conferences and multi-agency meetings, because you can't always tell whether or not somebody else is in the room, and that's posed some particular difficulties. And some families just haven't had the technology to engage equitably, so we're now moving towards a different way of working with families who don't have the technology to be able to work to engage equitably through a digital platform. It's very important that we maintain that equity of parents particularly being able to equally participate within a multidisciplinary meeting. The increase of looked after children has obviously had an impact on the shortage of placements, and we've had a significant increase in the cost of those placements. So Havenbrook, our short breaks unit, has supported a significant number of children in crisis. As I say, our foster carers have taken additional children for short periods of time, and we've had to increase our use of independent fostering agencies. Recruitment of vacant posts has been considerably harder to kind of progress at pace. We have managed it and we have had new workers start, but it has been a challenge to kind of do that safely and remotely. Could I have the next slide, please? So in terms of our next steps in children's social care, obviously we're planning sort of on a day-by-day basis to manage and predict the further increase in demand. There is a national prediction that we will have a significant spike in November. We're trying to prepare for that. It will be a challenge for us, but I have every confidence that the staff team will rise to meet that challenge. We're trying to find ways of supporting staff to continue manage challenging work, and especially the psychological and emotional impact. And the use of Mount McKinley is a key area of that. So it is open as a safe workspace and staff are able to access it. Some need to access it more than others. But we're also at the same time developing a model for a new way of working for our staff in line with the Council's direction of travel that is sustainable, supportive, but enables the flexibility that most of our staff actually want. I think that they've seen the benefits of flexible working and being able to work from home sometimes. Continue to work with our education colleagues to support children who are vulnerable when not in school due to the bubbles being sent home. So we're responding to each of those incidences as they recur alongside our education and public health colleagues, and really address the financial challenges faced. I mean, obviously, children's social care's financial challenges prior to COVID, it has been exacerbated by COVID, particularly in relation to placements and the impact of COVID-19 on the number of children becoming looked after. In amongst this, we're also having to prepare for Ofsted assurance visits. They've commenced, and some of our local authorities in the West Midlands have had theirs or are at the start of theirs. We anticipate an assurance visit before Christmas, and a full inspection will be due probably in the spring when Ofsted do recommence their full programme of full inspections. And at the centre of all of this, I think it's really important to remember that most importantly, we have to maintain children at the centre of all that we do, and our staff are continuing to do that on a daily basis. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions, and Danessa's also happy to field questions.
Thank you, Sonia. And before we go any farther, I think from this committee, the message go to big thank you to all the staff, how they've coped with all this, with the children. It's just amazing. And how our foster carers have stepped up to the mark as well. You know, they've took in extra children. I think they've done a fantastic job, and it's a big thank you from all of us for all the work that they've had to do.
Thank you, Peggy. That's gratefully received.
Thank you. So, anybody got any questions or comments?
No, good report.
Cecilia Motley has a question, Chair.
Celia?
Thank you very much, Chair. Sonia, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm just trying to get a feel for the fact that we have managed to continue doing face-to-face visits to our vulnerable children, and we appear to be the only people who have been doing that. And I'm just wondering if you could run through, if it's appropriate, what other partner agencies would be involved, and how they have been supporting themselves, the work that our social workers are doing.
So from our perspective, obviously we are a statutory function. So when the guidance initially came out, we had to follow the guidance that related to statutory work, and that's why some of our social workers continue to do face-to-face work. I have to say in the early days that wasn't all of that, and that's why we rag rated each of the children. So some children continued to have visits that were virtual, some of them we increased the frequency, and some of them, you know, we continued to do face-to-face, and that depended very much on the individual risks and circumstances and the family, etc. Each partner agency responded to their own guidance, and obviously our health colleagues particularly had to respond to being called into the front line. So a lot of our health colleagues, so health visiting, midwifery, really key partners, particularly in terms of supporting you know, babies and young children, were basically, you know, pulled in to be able to work on the front line, and that was part of their response. I'd say all partners continue to work very proactively in relation to virtually engaging with families. So other partners that are very key to us are the Youth Offending Service, the drug and alcohol teams, mental health support, etc. Obviously, our adult mental health social workers also continue to visit parents, but we had that support from them. But a lot of that contact was virtual. Schools were also key. They did maintain contact. with families throughout, either by email, by telephone, through virtual, video calling, etc. But you can imagine that if a school's got X number of hundreds of children to support and try and educate, what happened there was if they had a concern, it was phoned in, understandably, to the social workers. So it was the social workers that were picking up those issues and concerns, which was fine, but there was quite a volume of that, particularly in the early days. So the Safeguarding Partnership has been absolutely key in terms of the partnership working together. So we've had initially weekly meetings to look at the partnership response to COVID, where the challenges lie for each of the partners, and then they are now currently continuing, but they're fortnightly, and they're really well attended right across the partnership. And of course, the other partner who was absolutely key to us, but had a real face-to-face role, was the police. And I think that their role is significant when you look at the data and the appendix. There is the graph that shows how the significant increase in police referrals, whereas normally our highest referral would be schools, it became police right the way through that kind of 6-month period. So that gives you two things. One is the impact on the police in terms of their workload, in terms of responding to those things, but also the seriousness of what was coming through. So for the police to have to respond to a scenario, the level and the threshold of harm and significance would have been quite high for the police to be that person, those people that were responding and then making that referral into us. Celia, have I answered your question?
Yeah, I think you've done very well, actually, Sonia. Just on the question of feedback, you're obviously developing a model for the new way of working. How are you going about collecting feedback, bearing in mind that you're having to work, in different ways with different cases?
Yes, so at the moment we haven't done a kind of formal feedback, but that is planned, and we want to do that at a point that is going to enable all of our staff, foster carers, partners to engage in a really kind of positive way. At the moment, I would suggest that the pressure is too significant in terms of workloads for us to roll that out at this point in time. We've got the social work health check out at the moment, which is a statutory requirement for us to do, so we will get a benchmark in relation to that. I meet with all managers on a weekly basis and we get feedback from them. Obviously the fostering teams particularly get feedback from foster carers, and we have the fostering support service who also give us feedback, as well as through adopters. So I think what we'd like to do is a formal feedback survey about what's worked really well, what people want to keep in terms of, the new ways of working, and we will formulate that. It will need to be in line with the kind of direction of travel of the council and the principles about flexible working moving forward. And I think our staff are welcoming of that. I think that they've learnt a lot of skills very quickly. They have saved time in travel, particularly, improved participation from partners where they're not driving between meetings and can't, attend clashes and things like that. So they have seen the benefits. Obviously, in terms of working with children directly, working with families directly, we're going to want to really reinstate that as being the kind of norm, using virtual forums to keep in touch with families and such like, but really have the direct contact with children and families back in as the norm as soon as it's safe to do so.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, Councillor Howson has a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Sonia, and thank you for a very comprehensive report, which is really interesting reading. I'd just like to question one area around the delays with young people leaving care due to some of the legal backlogs that you've experienced beyond your control. Is this improving, and what sort of assurance is being provided to these young people regarding timescales and future accommodation and services for them, please?
Okay, so can I split that into two parts? That's probably the easiest way of answering that question. So in relation to the children that are exiting care that may have been through the court system, for example, and so what we're seeing is delays in those care plans being completed. Yes, there is a lot of progress being made. So obviously our court footprint is across ourselves, Telford and Wrekin, Walsall, Wolverhampton, and Dudley, and so the courts have worked very hard. They've got a projected plan in place, and they are aiming to conclude all of those proceedings that were delayed for some reason or another by the end of December, and it's currently on track to achieve that. Obviously, that could well be affected by any other kind of sort of local lockdowns or, you know, anything like that. So the children that we have that were kind of in the middle of proceedings at the start of lockdown and then got delayed, they are making progress, and we are starting to see final hearings kind of complete. The other aspect then is the courts making sort of final orders for children who are already sort of on orders but might be exiting through a different way, for example, an adoption order or a special guardianship order. So again, all of that data is with the courts. They're aware that those need to be progressed. Those children's placements aren't being delayed in any way, shape or form. They're in the placements that they're going to be, they're in the families that they're going to be in. But actually the final kind of order and that kind of security around that permanence is what, you know, has been delayed. The second cohort of children, young people really, is our care leavers. So obviously we've had a number of children who have become young people who've become 18. The government's guidance right at the beginning was to try not to move care leavers unnecessarily, and wherever possible support them to stay in their placements, because obviously there were issues around housing not being able to move people because of the COVID restrictions, evictions were ceased, etc. So we have got some care leavers who technically have left our care, if you like, and moved on into independence, but actually haven't in terms of their placements. And that's been right for them. I mean, you know, a lot of them are quite vulnerable anyway. And so to then do a move when the support mechanisms aren't in place around them isn't necessarily the, you know, the right thing for them. So we were very grateful for that guidance, because that helps us work with housing colleagues, other providers of accommodation, to make sure that our care leavers move as far as possible at the right time for them. But both of those affect our kind of children exiting the system, as you can imagine.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. That's really helpful. Thank
Okay. You. I can assure you the panels are working well using our new technology. Question, Sonia, what additional staffing do you anticipate we need to meet the increase in the coming increase in demand, and how we're going to recruit them?
If I had the answer to that question, Peggy, I think the way we're at the moment is that we have got some additional capacity in various teams at the moment. So we've got an additional capacity in our disabled children's team, our looked after children's team, a little bit at the front door, and where else? The court team. So what we're trying to do is creatively use some social work roles and kind of try things a bit differently in terms of managing some aspects of work differently. So we're creating and interviewing at the moment for an exploitation social worker to lead on working with children who are at risk of exploitation. So we can try and sort of manage workload in a different way for our frontline social workers. We have got some of those additional capacity as agency. Some of it is staff working additional hours if they're kind of currently part-time at the moment. At the moment, if we needed additional staff, it would be a challenge both agency-wise and sort of permanent recruitment-wise. So we just keep going with it really, and we constantly. We are having some success at that, and actually Danessa might be able to answer that question in a bit more detail, because she's recently had some success in recruiting some social workers.
Yes, thanks, Sonia. Morning all. For those that don't know me, my name is Danessa Gray and I'm a service manager working to Sonia. I manage the case management service. So in terms of our recruitment, over the period of COVID, we've actually been able to recruit 3 or 4 social workers into the service. And I don't think there is an issue with social workers looking for positions. The issue for us is experienced workers. So we're getting ASYEs newly qualified social workers coming through the door, and we're also getting experience. So in terms of our recruitment, getting people to apply to Shropshire is not an issue, and we continue to see that occur.
Good. Good.
Chair, perhaps I could come in there, please.
Yes.
Just to add, obviously members will be aware that part of our strategy has been to grow our own social workers. So we have got 8 social workers currently with her, trainee social workers currently with us. They started in January and are providing really good and valuable support to our social work teams. And members may also be aware that we are out to recruit another round of trainee social workers under the apprenticeship scheme to start again in January. So our strategy really is very much about building and growing our own, as well as recruiting external on the external field. Thank you.
Oh, that's excellent news. Thank you, Karen. I'm back to Sonia now.
We've no further questions, Chair, at the moment from members.
No, I want to know how we get recruiting foster carers. Are we going to need more?
We desperately need more, Peggy. Yes, we do. So the recruitment for foster carers is continuing, and we have had quite a good, positive, kind of consistent flow of applications through COVID, and those assessments are in progress. Obviously, those assessments are a bit more of a challenge to undertake because a lot of that work has to be done virtually, but not all of it can be done virtually, and we do have to be able to visit safely and, you know, have that kind of face-to-face. So I know that we've been very successful and that Foster Panel has approved a number of foster carers in recent months, and that's continuing to do so. And we've still got a few more, about 5 or 6, I think, that are in assessment at the moment that should be, you know, going to panel in the next couple of months. So yes, we do need to kind of continue to recruit more. Unfortunately, we have lost a few foster carers, not directly as a result of COVID. We had one very long-standing foster carer passed away just before COVID, and that had a significant impact because she was one of our foster carers who always took sort of emergency children as well as long-term children. So and you know, we've had a couple of foster carers retire and stuff, so it's always kind of a battle to keep it above 1 in, 1 out type approach. But the fostering team are doing really well with that. And where we have had a significant increase is the number of connected carers. So family members who want to then care for children from their extended family. And the fostering team are very, very busy doing those assessments for connected carers. And I suppose you're aware through Fostering Panel, there's a fair few of those coming through at the moment.
Thank goodness for grandparents.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but my chat's not working, so I can't request a question, but I have a question.
Okay, well, I can hear you.
Okay. It was mentioned that they had to deal, the team had to deal with complexities of family situations and levels of harm. How are these dealt with, and what changes have there been since COVID?
So they're dealt with within line with the statutory guidance, and there hasn't actually been very much change in relation to that kind of high risk scenarios that we face with some families. So the process is very similar. The only significant difference is that the initial child protection conference and the meetings around that would be virtual. So and that's why we have to make sure that we can enable parents to participate as equitably as possible. So where there are issues of serious and significant harm, which we have seen an increase, then that follows the statutory process, Kevin, in terms of the strategy discussion, the Section 47 inquiry. If the threshold for significant harm is met, it goes to an initial child protection conference. Where there are serious issues of harm, in the legal planning meeting, and we consider issuing care proceedings. In emergency situations, we issue those care proceedings on an emergency basis. We have had a number of those. You'll note from the report that our court team was structured to hold about 70 sets of care proceedings at the time of writing, I think it says 94. I think we're up to about 98 sets of care proceedings at the moment. So we've had a significant increase in Shropshire in terms of the care proceedings, in line with most other local authorities regionally and nationally. But that is where we are seeing the increase in work and the complexity, the types of harm that are being experienced.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Chair, perhaps if I could make a comment, and I know that Ed wants to come in as well, but just on that latter point in terms of legal proceedings, of course, it's not just children's services that are impacted by that. Our legal team is clearly having to deal with the increased demand also. So, you know, the impact is across the organisation as well. Thank you.
And I think Karen is right there. And, you know, the shift to virtual happened across our council and our response, but it's also happened across the court system as well. And so our legal services have had to manage and support the court system very much in relation to shifting to the virtual court hearings. And that's, you know, was a challenge, particularly in the early days. They did a lot of the organising of hearings and such like, because the court system just didn't have the virtual platforms in place to be able to do that.
If I could come in, Chair. Ed Potter here, portfolio holder for Children's Services.
Morning, Ed.
Morning, hi. I just wanted to add to the record my thanks on behalf of members for the work that Sonia, Karen, their teams right through Children's Services have been doing in order to try and keep our children safe through all this. It's been extremely challenging. I've had regular catch-ups with Karen and Sonia and Fran and various officers, as well as dropping into some virtual sessions with social workers, and I understand the pressures that they're under, and I particularly want to pay thanks to our foster carers who have really stepped up to the mark. And I believe there's a letter coming from Corporate Parenting Panel from myself to thank all our staff, our social workers right through, because without them going above and beyond, and I literally mean above and beyond at times, for Shropshire's children, we would be in a very different position, I think. So I just wanted to add that to the record, and I'm sure others would like to agree with me on that one.
I'm sure we would. So have there been any outstanding challenges for staff with regards to the technology that they're having to use remotely?
So we do have the challenges, and obviously everybody will know that sort of Teams has its good days and bad days. It's you know, some days it works really well and really smoothly, and other days it doesn't. I think the ongoing challenge for our staff is where it's fine when it's a professionals meeting and people have the technology to be able to do that, but obviously not all parents have the same technology platforms, access, etc. So moving forward, we really need to think about that and how we enable you know, our families to participate. I think that's going to be our greatest challenge, and I'm really looking forward to exploring the sort of, you know, the community hub ideas and having the ability for parents to maybe meet social workers there to be able to then participate in a hybrid meeting. At the moment, where we've got families who really can't participate, we have those meetings at Mount McKinley, socially distanced, of course. And for example, if it's a child protection conference, it would be the chair of the conference and the parents socially distanced in the meeting room, and then all the partners and other participants would be up on the screen. So we're trying to really work to a kind of hybrid model where you know, where it's needed. But I think the temperamental nature of Teams, and with, you know, such huge numbers of staff using it, I mean, I think our IT colleagues are fantastic, particularly at responding when we do have issues. But you know, it does seem to have its good days and bad days. Yeah.
I think we know the feeling well, Sonia.
Yeah, and I think the other issue that it will take time to work out is across the partnership. Different partners have different platforms. So our health colleagues kind of prefer to use Teams. Our police colleagues have been reliant on Skype. And so all of that kind of those issues, our IT team are supporting us to work out what is going to be the moving forward, the shared platform that everybody's going to be able to use, you know, effectively, securely, and, you know, reliably.
Just thank goodness we invested in that technology when we did. Some councils certainly didn't. So the other question is, how are we supporting the staff who are working from home? You know, are they all coping?
Danessa, do you want to take that question initially?
Sure. So in terms of supporting staff, we're having team managers are having regular check-ins with them because clearly there are some staff that are finding it more easy to work at home than others. We're still giving staff opportunities to come into the office where they need to, and managers are having sort of regular check-ins with their teams. Certainly in my service, they have a daily morning check-in, as I do with my managers, just to check out the temperature in terms of how people are doing, and they have regular team meetings. So we're constantly checking in with our staff. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Sonia.
Yeah, and we've asked team managers to try over sort of September, October and into November to do a face-to-face supervision. So all of our staff receive supervision regularly on, you know, as is required, but a lot of that has been obviously virtual. It's not quite the same experience, as everybody will, you know, acknowledge. So the team managers are sort of supporting staff for those that want to come in and have a face-to-face supervision and, you know, be able to have that kind of contact. Mount McKinley is open. As I've said, we are able to have about 60 staff in on a daily basis safely, and to manage that safely, and it is often used to verging on that capacity between 50 and 60. Some of that is social workers working on a duty basis. Some of that is admin staff coming in to sort of do, you know, either their duty rota and be admin on duty, or to sort of do printing and posting and you know, other kind of admin things. And some of it is meetings. So I think that the fact that the base has always been open, and therefore people have been able to always access it if they've wanted to for that additional support, has been a major contributory factor. Our newly qualified social workers are based at Mount McKinley mostly because they need the breadth of experience and support and being around colleagues. And we have some teams who are still almost completely remote, depending on where they live and what their role is, and others are much more in on a sort of rota basis. Moving forward, we will enable every team to be able to come in and be together at least one day a month on a kind of rota basis, whilst we've got the social distancing restrictions in place.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Nick, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say, as chair of the corporate parenting board, you know, add to what Ed has said. I also particularly want to say I happen to live next door to one of our foster carers, so I can see at first hand what a fabulous job they do. You know, a little chap arrived a few weeks ago at, I think, an extremely short notice, welcomed into the family, settled into the local community very, very quickly. They don't make a big thing of it. They just get on and are a fabulous support to our children. Lovely to see it at first hand. So, you know, it's a great privilege to live next door to them. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any points that officers wish to clarify? No? If there are no more speakers,
No more speakers, Chair. No more questions.
And do we have any proposals? Yes.
I'm really struggling to see that because I've got an authenticate your system thing right in the middle of the screen. Please read it for me.
Members of the People Overview Committee consider the content of the report, that members acknowledge the cross-working across the Directorate that has enabled the work to safeguard vulnerable children, including schools, that members note the increase in demand across the service and impact of this across the service, that members note that they identified next steps for continuing to safeguard children at risk of harm in Shropshire, continue to place demands on the service as we continue to respond to COVID-19, and try and resume some service normality. That's better. We now need to take a vote on that.
Chair, you don't necessarily need to take a vote. I think if the committee if there is general agreement, then we don't need to go to the formality of a vote unless people feel otherwise.
I think we all agree, don't we? Yes, the nobody's
no
answered
vote,
me,
Chair.
so,
Yes.
yeah. We're now, I'm not sure how I deal with this, Daniel.
I'll take this.
Can you take ahead?
Yes, of course I can, Chair. In your papers, sorry, it's Daniel Webb here, Overview and Scrutiny Officer here at the Council, supporting this committee. In your papers is a proposed work programme for the municipal year up until meetings in March, after which, of course, we move to elections. Obviously, I've taken some liberties with this because obviously this is the first time this committee has met since it agreed its work programme back in January, I think. Obviously, things have moved on a lot there, and some of those topics have either become redundant or been superseded by other issues. What we propose for your November meeting is something that arose from your scrutiny of the council and its partners' response to criminal exploitation of children. The committee noted at the time that there appeared to be several bodies within the council, several partnership bodies that the council organised that seemed to be tackling the same issue, and they did raise questions about how those committees, so those partnerships would work together and coordinate their work, and we now have an answer to that. In recent months, the council's put quite a bit of work into revamping its safeguarding partnerships to bring together the relevant partnership boards under a single organisational structure. So the service manager is very keen to bring that to scrutiny going forward and to identify ways in which scrutiny can contribute to the development of that work, not only with this committee but through other committees. Obviously, it's a very wide-ranging partnership. So we propose to bring that to your meeting in November. In January, there is a topic that you asked to look at earlier this year, which is around transitioning to adulthood, which is a topic that perennially crops up within other topics that this committee looks at, most recently with regards to looked after children. And there is work elsewhere within scrutiny looking at transition, particularly around mental health. So we propose to bring something, an overview of how we support looked after children in particular, but also children with a special education need or disability as they transition into adulthood. And we also propose to receive an update on your work looking at housing support for looked after children. This is obviously the children's residential care, our children's homes, as well as our leaving care flats. There's another topic in here actually, which I think in light of others I should have probably removed actually, around the community safety partnership and exploitation, because I suspect that will be covered in your November meeting anyway. And then finally in March, two of the topics that you asked to look at earlier this year, which were obviously delayed due to the pandemic, around drug and alcohol services for young people and short breaks for respite care, which we proposed to look at in March. However, this is only a draft work programme, it's your work programme, and it's for you to shape how you see fit. So I am ready to take any points that you wish to add, subtract or edit to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. The only one I would like for November, if we could add it, just a quick report on how the schools have reacted coming back, back into being into school. Have we got many children that have stayed at home, not coming back in, and generally, how I don't know, Karen, is that possible?
Yes, it is, Chair. I am intending to do a member briefing over the next week with some highlights on that, but I'm very happy to bring that back in November.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say, Chair,
yes.
I've mentioned this before. Yesterday, I attended a school meeting, governor's meeting, and I was quite surprised by the attendance records that this was Hormone Federation, which is Halscott Juniors and Sundawn Infants. Halscott Juniors attendance has actually increased, and Sundawn Infants has dropped by less than 0.5%, I think it is, or certainly not more than 1%. So it's very, very good.
Oh, that's excellent news. Yeah, let's hope it's repeated across the county. That would be good.
Chair, generally I can confirm that our attendance is above the national average, and we're well into the mid 90s at the moment. So
it's good news, Karen. Yeah,
it's positive at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we now are going on to back to item 6. Sorry. Recommendation first, that we agree the proposed committee work programme attached at the appendix. Suggest any changes to the committee work programme, and anybody recommend any other topics they'd like to consider? Any answers? Okay. Well, I think as things are at the moment, we need to be quite flexible with what's happening in this county. Is this for me to read, Daniel?
So yeah, that's fine. I mean, Jay, if I'll take the silence from the committee there as being in agreement with those, and I will edit the work programme as discussed by yourself and as discussed by myself while presenting. So it's over to you now, Chair, to the next item on the agenda.
My apologies, I forgot to thank Sonia for that excellent report we had. Thank you both. Exclusion of press and public, to consider a resolution that, in accordance with the provision of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4 bracket 5 of the Council's Access to Information Rules, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item. Okay.
We need a proposer and a seconder for that, Chair, please.
I'll propose that, Chair.
Sorry, I'll second Councillor Allcross.
Okay.
Councillor Houghton.
Thank you. We'll now move into the private session of the meeting.
Thank you.